Welcome to the second episode of the Nobody Listens podcast. I'm Ruven.
I'm Maddie.
And this week we decided to watch, last week we decided to watch something which we actually both did this week, which is Mad Max Fury Road, the fourth and for the time being final part of the Mad Max saga. It was directed by George Miller, who is, other than being famous for being the director of the other Mad Max movies, also famous for doing that movie Babe, the movie where the pig runs away, and Happy Feet, the movie with the dancing penguins. The first three movies were...
What?
Yeah.
What?
That is what he did in between the Mad Max movies, because the last one with Mel Gibson is from 85, this one is from 2015.
Fuck Mel Gibson.
Yeah, so there are 30 years between those, and in that time he made Babe and Happy Feet, among other
Mel
things.
Gibson's a cunt.
Yeah, and we have this George Miller guy who did Mad Max to blame for Mel Gibson being a thing, because Mel Gibson started with Mad Max. Thankfully, this one doesn't have Mel Gibson in it. The main character, Mad Max Rokitansky, is this time played by Tom Hardy, who I enjoy more than seeing Mel Gibson. Not only because he's cute and a good actor, but also because he's not Mel Gibson. He is cute though, isn't he?
I guess.
Not really in a sexy way, more in a puppy dog kind of way,
Yeah.
You really want to go through his hair when, he's... Well, we actually didn't just watch the movie to perv on the main character, but
I didn't.
I didn't either. I mostly did it because I know it was good and because, action and philosophy and politics sounds like a good deal to me. But sure. Yeah, attractive main character isn't a bad thing either. If you haven't seen Mad Max Fury Road yet, go and watch it. We're gonna spoil a whole lot of it, not only because of the attractive main character, it's also a damn fine movie.
That it is.
You don't need to have seen the other three parts. All of them kind of function on their own, and it's not even clear if it's in the same continuity. You don't have to know anything. Start with this one if you want to. I haven't seen the other three. I might someday, but no, you can just watch this. So the main reason we decided to talk about this movie is because many people hate it. Last week it was kind of the same thing, where we talked about Life of Brian, because a lot of fundamentalist Christians hated it. Can you explain the reason why this movie was hated, Maddie?
Personally, I think a lot of the hate came from having a female lead that didn't fit the typical mold. And obviously, a lot of the so-called alt-right were kind of going nuts about that.
For anyone who doesn't know, the alt-right, which is short for alternative right, is something that Nazis on the internet like to call themselves when they are harassing women and minorities.
Funny that this group of people always accuse people of being too politically correct and go on about how political correctness is destroying society, blah, 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 and free speech. Yet we're expected to call a bunch of Nazis and fascists the alt-right. We're expected to call lies alternative facts, and so on and so forth. Funny how that works.
These people, who I'm just gonna call assholes or Nazis or whatever, because they don't deserve to be treated like something special by me if they are just on the internet to harass minorities and women. I'm part of a minority, you're a woman. They are on the internet to be assholes to us. I'm not gonna give them any special privileges. I'm just gonna call them out for what they are. So those little fascists got mad that the 30-year later sequel of a movie that really not that many people have actually seen in our generation.
If only you guys could see his hand gestures.
Yeah, I do that. That was pointed out to be a lot in the last few weeks. That when I'm explaining something, I apparently turn into an Italian person. Anyway,
you mean Donald Trump?
No, because those are
with his
actually
tiny accordion.
what I was saying before we decided to talk about something that you can't see is that the reason they apparently got mad about it is that they saw a female main character in the movie. The movie has two heroes, basically, two big heroes. One of them is Mad Max, and the other one is Charlize Theron as Furiosa, who we will get into later. And they got mad. This movie wasn't just about strong guys, but also had a strong girl, and decided to try and make a big fuss about that.
Yes, I'd say they made a fuss because she didn't fit their mold of what a woman looks like. Even if she's a main character in an action movie, there's this idea that a woman should look or act a certain way to appeal to male viewers.
What I found in this movie is that we, for a change, actually have a female main character who looks like she could do the action parts of an action movie. Many times in an action movie, even in ones I like, you see that the female character doesn't look equipped for the task.
For instance, you'd see somebody who would appear physically incapable of the task, or sometimes, say for instance, wearing shoes in which it would be physically impossible to carry out the actions.
This character, Furiosa, looks like she actually could do all the things she does. She looks beaten up at times, and she has a like strong robot arm, which actually looks like it could lift a whole lot more than a regular human hand. She looks very, very fit, and she's wearing like actual work clothes and not like a princess dress when in a fucking monster truck.
I would actually argue, however, that although people were annoyed that she didn't fit the traditional tropes, I don't think she was as far away from them or as subversive as people were saying.
How so?
In many ways, it was still Max would always save the day, so to speak. There was a scene where all the women had gathered in the desert, and it was just Max explaining the plan to them, explaining where they should go, what they should do, and everyone just nodding along and agreeing. The big man in the group is always... You know how in, say, action or horror movies, which has a group at the center of a scene, or perhaps as a main cast, there's always some guy at the head of it telling everyone where to go and what to do.
Yeah, basically, like the Aragorn type character.
Yes.
Was that always Max in this movie, or did she do some of this herself? I'm not sure right now. Because looking back at it myself, they kind of seem to be equally the leader of the team.
In some ways. The other thing... Sure, go on.
Right.
Go on.
In this movie, the two main characters escape a cult of someone, Immortan Joe, and they escape with Immortan Joe's harem, basically.
His 5 wives, who he basically keeps as livestock almost. Yeah. Yes.
Not almost.
Yep.
He keeps them basically not even as a harem, because he doesn't seem to care about having sex with them, just about them giving him sons. So they are more his breeding stock than his harem. You're right about that. And the two heroes of the movie, basically, Max, who is an escaped prisoner of Immortan Joe, and Furiosa, who used to be an ally of Immortan Joe, just escape with his 5 wives, as he calls them. Well, he actually doesn't call them his wives. He calls them
That's
his
how they're
property.
referred to in the canon. But,
Yeah,
yes.
the canon and everyone else refers to them as wives, but he refers to them as his property, which is something that I want to get in deeper later, but you had a point to make.
Oh yeah, I did.
Do you remember what it was about?
You were talking about Furiosa's capability in the action scenes.
Yeah.
However, I noticed one thing in the fight sequences.
Which is?
Whatever the point of the movie is, or how much they were trying to subvert the notion of men and women in action movies, they still seem too afraid to not make the female characters suck at hand-to-hand combat.
Well, she
Sorry, she sucked at hand-to-hand combat.
Two things about that. One, maybe that is because she has a robot arm. Two, maybe that is why they gave her that robot arm.
What about his leg, though? I mean,
Yeah.
they can't seem to get past this idea of having to portray women as physically weak.
Which is just too ingrained in our movie culture, I think.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is basically, even if you are trying to make a strong female character, you are still stuck in the sexist ideas that action movies always had.
I'm not sure whether it's a part of the conditioning or whether the filmmakers were just too afraid to go there with it. I can't say for sure.
It's a culture. I mean, I don't have George Miller here with me, so I can't ask him, but I assume it's a culture. And Furiosa is actually the only woman who has fighting abilities in the movie. Because every other female character is either an old woman or one of the wives.
Those old women had some fighting abilities.
But she is the only character which is involved in the big action sequences while being female.
True.
Now I may disagree with you. I wouldn't even say it's a feminist movie. I'd say it's a movie.
So?
I'd say it's a movie against objectification in general, and because most people who argue against objectification of women and people in general are, of course, feminists. They kind of said, all right, this is a feminist movie, and the anti-feminists also said, all right, this is a feminist movie, but the most obvious point where somebody is objectified is actually Max. For a long stretch of the movie, Max is bound, muzzled, and has blood taken out of him while he is strapped to the front of a car like one of these fucking topless mermaids of old ships, which I think is... He is meant to be one of those in that scene, right? You are meant to think of those topless mermaids. And he is...
Is that what you thought of?
Yeah, it is. And I think the filmmaker wants me to think of that.
That didn't even cross my mind.
I mean, he is strapped to the front of a moving vehicle while having his hands behind his back.
And you call me a perv.
I'm not the pervy here. George Miller is the pervy, or shipwrights are the pervs. Let's take them to task before taking me to task.
Yeah, but taking you to task is more fun.
In the scene, he reminds you of A, a dog, and B, an object based on an attractive woman. So they treat him like a fighting animal, like a dispensary of sorts, because they take his blood, and like the object modeled after an attractive woman.
I found it difficult to say whether or not the wives were objectified.
The wives, do you mean by Immortan Joe in the movie or by the filmmaker outside the movie?
The filmmaker outside the movie.
That is actually a good
I found
question.
that difficult to say. Because I can't just look at... You can't just look at what they're wearing and say, oh, that's objectification, because what about someone's choice to wear whatever they want without being judged as an object? At the same time, with our social conditioning, I can see how people might think that. Not just what they're wearing, but I mean...
How the camera treats them.
Yes, how the camera treats them. Their movements, the camera angle when they're walking.
Which is, in this case, more important than what they are wearing, because what they're wearing
doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, because that is in the text. It was a bit confusing when you started talking about...
Yeah, cut that bit out.
I can't cut that out. I can just say that obviously they are half naked because they are sex slaves, but the camera still treat them in a way which might objectify them a bit more.
I mean, that's an interesting point, actually. I'd never look at somebody dressed like that and say, oh, they're an object, they're objectified or whatever. But knowing the way Hollywood and the film industry works, it's likely that could have been the intention.
Although I'm not too sure if it was, because you may have noticed this movie has a striking visual style, not only that it basically only has two colors. The whole movie is either like orangey yellow or blue, but also that you don't have to look anywhere but in the middle of the screen. What you are supposed to be looking at is always right smack dab in the middle of the picture. That makes it easy to follow the action scenes, but it also means that whatever is in the middle is literally the object of the scene. And so if you see a person there and the person is not going at it with fighting or driving, they are basically to be looked at by the viewer. And if you see someone there who is a half-naked girl, there could be a problem with that. And as you said, there is a problem with that.
Yeah.
Because to you, they were shown as objects.
Yeah. It was
And that is a question.
much more to do with the camera angle and the movements than anything to do with clothing.
And this is actually a point the movie raises, something that you wouldn't think about with other movies. Because this movie, even before showing you these girls, shows you graffiti of the phrase, "We are not objects."
Yes.
So this movie very much wants you to think about objectification.
Although, when you said that you're not sure if it's a feminist movie, I would disagree, because in many ways, I thought the film challenged, well, at least started to challenge the ideas of essentialism that are so ingrained into us.
Explain.
In the sense of Furiosa being a female action hero and not having to also be someone's love interest, or not having to have a personality that's, or certain traits that are commonly associated with being female, and the male characters didn't have to be tough all the time.
Yeah, as I said, Max kind of reminded me of basically a strong dog being cuddly in this movie a lot.
What was the name of the other one? The war boy who escaped.
Nux.
That's the one.
Nux. Yeah. He is very interesting to talk about, but I don't really have an angle to tackle him from. Do you want to say any more about Nux?
I don't know. Like I said, he was basically bred to fight for Immortan Joe, but he was just kind of an adorable character.
And isn't it weird that in 2015 we had two different foot soldiers of the evil guys joining a woman to fight their oppressor? We had that with Nux.
Star Wars.
Yeah, with Nux in Mad Max, and later that year with Finn in Star Wars. And I really like that kind of character.
One thing I'm glad about in this movie is they didn't push the romantic plot line that I kind of thought they would.
Yeah, when I saw that it was an action movie, or really any kind of movie with a male and female co-lead, I was really worried they would go...
I was talking about Nux and the red-haired woman.
Oh.
Capable, I think? Yeah, I was
Capable.
talking about that one. Did the movie imply that they fucked?
I think it did.
I like the fact that they left it at that rather than...
I really don't want a sex scene with one of the, what are they called, war boys. And I really don't want to have a sex scene with Furiosa and Max, even though they are both attractive. It would just not fit. It would just be awkward if there was.
That would have ruined the whole thing.
Yeah. Or
That would be,
even a
again, she
kiss,
has to be a love interest.
even a kiss scene would have ruined it.
I thought they were gonna go there, with the blood transfusion thing.
I'm really glad they didn't.
Same. Did she lose an eye, by the way?
I don't think she did. But while we are talking about losing body parts, something weird.
There's a sex joke in here somewhere.
No, yeah, but I'm actually gonna make a point about the movie. Thank you for giving me a good point to transition into the next bit, which is that Furiosa, as I said, has one robot arm in an unexplained backstory, which is great. The movie leaves a lot you can think about what happened in the past. She lost one of her arms and now has a robot arm.
Mhm.
And Denise, who is a friend of mine, a former classmate, that is to everyone but you know,
Yep.
said that she found it great that it had a character with a disability, and the movie didn't bring up that disability.
Why did I pick up on that?
And I didn't, and I'm actually disabled. But I think that this fucking bullshit with a disability that doesn't really hinder you really needs to fucking stop. Because people who are disabled have problems. And if you just say, well, she's disabled, but she really doesn't have a problem with that, that is not how this bullshit works.
That is true.
Even though I don't mind it happening a few times, and I'm not saying they should have had a big plot point where she was hindered by her robot arm, but
She was at one point.
it was very subtle though.
Instead, what they did was they just kind of made her suck at combat with the arm.
Do you think that is enough? Or do you think that actually hinders the character as a woman?
Yes. That's what I'm saying.
But maybe what I wanted to see more of is what they actually tried with that, and instead they failed her as a female character with that?
Yes, they should have showed perhaps if she was going to have difficulties with combat, wouldn't it make more sense to have it related to the arm rather than just have her be physically weaker when she had the arm on? She didn't actually do all that much in the way of combat. As in the beginning when she met Max, he was just overpowering her within seconds, and she needed so much backup. And then through most of the combat scenes, she mostly just drove. They really, I think, should have made her more physically capable as a fighter.
And have more of the driver seat switching going on.
Yes. I actually found it funny how many people were claiming that Max wasn't the main character in this one.
Yeah.
He was.
Well, he was one of two.
I mean, I honestly don't know where that came from.
I don't know either, even though I'm gonna point this out again. In the Mad Max movies, Max always has someone else to fight along with or to fight for, other than in the first movie. Apparently in the second movie, he only said 16 lines. He isn't really the most talkative person in this one either, but he says more than 16 lines.
And even so, he is developed as a main character.
He is.
I mean, remember the opening of the movie?
Yeah, he had a voiceover.
It's basically some brief backstory.
And some he got more backstory than Furiosa did. Furiosa was basically just the enforcer or whatever of Immortan Joe. And he actually got some backstory and some mental issues. Like, we actually see scenes from his perspective because we see his dreams and his hallucinations.
I think that part and some of what was going on when it switched to Immortan Joe a lot of the opening sequence, as you said, this can definitely be watched as a standalone film. But I noticed that if somebody has absolutely no context to go with for that part of the movie, I can see how it would be really fucking disturbing.
Which part?
The whole first 10 minutes.
With the flashbacks and him getting captured.
Yes.
Alright, yeah. Yeah, definitely wouldn't watch this movie when I was sick or drunk or whatever. Because that would freak me right the fuck out. Before we
I
get...
also found the milk scene quite disturbing.
Yeah, I warned you about that.
Was that the one?
Yeah,
that was the one you were warning me about.
Yeah, I was actually... She asked me, before she watched the movie, if there were bare tits in the movie.
I didn't ask you that specifically. I asked you if there was any fucking in the movie.
Oh yeah.
And you said no, but there's some tits. I also don't get why tits are sexualized so much. I'm glad that in this movie, said tits weren't treated as a sexual object or something obscene.
No, it
or
was
censored.
Just.
Did it have to happen that way?
I think so, because it's furthering the objectification point the movie makes over and over again, with some women basically being used as milking cows. Before we get into different reactions to the movie, I want to point out that one of the cars in this movie was actually from another movie. You remember the spiked beetle?
Mm.
That is from a 70s horror comedy called The Cars That Ate Paris. I don't know why that is a movie, but apparently they still had a car from that around and they used that. Alright, so media critic Anita Sarkeesian wrote a few things about the movie after people said that it was like a feminist movie, which I also took some issue with, but for a whole different reason. As you might know, Anita Sarkeesian is the founder and main person of something called feminist...
The main person, and here I present the main person of something called Feminist Frequency.
Anyway, she took issue with people calling it a feminist movie, and she wrote a lot of shit about it. Shit as in stuff, not as in something I don't like. On Twitter about it. And can you just read that to us? Because you are actually English, and so when you read English it sounds better than when I read English.
Where did I... Okay, there it is. Let me just bring it up. Fuck. Let me just bring it up.
That's what he
Bear
said.
with. Who's he?
You said, fuck, let me just bring it up. And I said, that's what he said, instead of that what
but who's he?
Well, certainly not me, as you know.
I understood it, but...
Anyway, can you read it?
Sarkeesian on Twitter, May 25th. Oh, that's what you wrote.
Yeah, that is... because I collected the tweets, because it was kind of difficult to read as just these thousands of tweets of her. I just sent Sarkeesian on Twitter.
Trump thing again. Right. She says, I'm not one to shy away from expressing unpopular opinions. So here goes. I saw Fury Road. I get why people like it, but it isn't feminist. On the surface, Mad Max is about resisting a cartoonish version of misogyny, but that resistance takes the form of more glorified violence. Fury Road is different from many action films in that it lets some women participate as equal partners in a cinematic orgy of male violence. Feminism doesn't simply mean women getting to partake in typical badass guy stuff, in quotation marks. Feminism is about redefining our social value system, sometimes violence may be necessary for liberation from oppression, but it's always tragic. Fury Road frames it as totally fun and awesome. As a film, Mad Max absolutely adores its gritty future. The camera caresses acts of violence in the same way it caresses the bride's bodies. "We are not things" is a great line, but doesn't work when the plot, and especially the camera, treats them like things from start to finish. Mad Max's villains are caricatures of misogyny, which makes overt misogynists angry, but does not challenge more prevalent forms of sexism. Viewers get to feel good about hating cartoon misogyny without questioning themselves or examining how sexism actually works in our society. It makes me profoundly sad that mainstream pop culture now interprets feminism to mean women can drive fast and stoically kill people too. We're starved for representations of powerful women, but we need to reimagine concepts of power and move beyond the glorification of violence. End quote.
So, what is your take on that?
Well, she raised one very good point, actually, which I had touched on earlier, which is that "we are not things" is a great line, but that the camera, the plot line, and mainly the camera treats them like things.
How do you feel about her saying that because the villains of the movie are so cartoonishly sexist, as she says, or cartoonishly oppressive, as I would put it, that it takes away from real life misogyny?
Well, it's a difficult thing. I'd say I would agree with her if it was set in our universe present day. This is a post-apocalyptic setting, and honestly, if misogyny in society were to carry on in the exact same way it is today, and nothing be done about it, would it be implausible for a post-apocalyptic world to be structured like that?
I think that after
It's not so cartoonish when put into context.
Yeah, when put into the context of being post-apocalyptic, and also when put into the context of who the fuck the Americans elected last year.
Exactly.
Because basically, the elections in the US and the referendum in Turkey and all the other shit we have been hearing in the news lately. I think a future like this becomes more likely by the fucking day. Especially if we could take also into consideration that the guys who got angry about this movie are essentially the guys who would make this movie reality.
I can kind of see it's an easy mistake to make, how not to be patronizing. How she could have, how do I put this? How not putting it into context might not have occurred to her.
That the setting is very important when looking at this movie, and she just basically didn't talk about the setting at all.
That's what I mean. So obviously, I think that was the key point there. So I wouldn't say it's cartoonish at all, really.
Well, it is in a way.
It's a post-apocalyptic world. Everything is fucking cartoonish.
It's a very cartoonish movie.
How can you...
That's the point.
That is the point. It's basically a gory action movie. So of course it's going to be like that to some extent. Also, how is one supposed to portray such a setting in a fully plausible way?
You can do a more realistic, less cartoony setting like that. The thing is, then it won't be a fun action movie anymore. And I know that most of the conversation that she is having there, that we are having now, that everyone is having about this movie is mostly about the philosophy presented within it. But let's be honest, mostly It's a really good,
I mean,
really fun action flick.
yes, but before judging whether something's cartoonish, you need to actually, I think, step back and look at the purpose and the setting and all that shit.
And the politics
The
are
other
part two.
thing
Or what are you saying?
is,
First look at the context, then
yes,
look at the politics.
yes. She took issue with the violence in the movies, as in she's saying basically, I guess, that violence is not the answer, and we need to redefine the social system, and that equality shouldn't be achieved by simply saying, okay, everyone gets to be violent. But I feel like she's kind of missing the point. As I said with my earlier point about subverting essentialism, surely that is the mic okay?
Yeah, it wasn't there for a second, but it is now.
Okay. Surely that is a feminist concept, though. It's about choice. It's about capability. Saying that women can participate in the same type of role, the same type of action. I don't see a problem with that, to be honest. Another thing I'm saying is, I think it's less that her argument is problematic, more that it's poorly constructed. She says, on one hand, fuck, I've lost it again. Cut this bit out. She says that can you cut out all the bits where I just fail to get my words out?
Yeah, I did that last time.
Okay, good. Right, let me get the tweet and start this again.
By the way, I think it's a
Okay,
phone.
so-
I think it's a phone and the mic.
There we go. Better?
Yeah, it is a phone. I don't know what's happening there, but the phone and
So, she basically says as a first point that it's not a feminist movie, which I disagree with. And then she says that just having everyone be violent isn't the answer to social change. The system needs to be reformed, which I agree with. But the way she's constructed it, I don't think the 2 points are relevant to each other.
Also, isn't
She's
that one of the...
basically saying, point A, this isn't a feminist movie. This isn't to do with women's equality. This doesn't challenge those issues, in her view. And then she's saying, because violence isn't the answer to social change. Not purely anyway.
Because
you see where I'm coming from?
I can see that, but...
It's a bit of a logical error.
As you said, those points are related to each other, and basically the movie also says that. The movie says, well, we can't just run away, we have to change things. That is why Max and Furiosa and everyone else comes back to the Citadel to actually change shit.
I'd say the problem is that she's stated a view on the movie, and she's stated a view on how to go about social change that aren't that related to each other, and somehow tried to make one follow from the next.
Because they both fit into her worldview, and you can hold both views at once. She kind of thinks that they are related to each other, even if they aren't.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
It's less problematic and more poorly constructed.
Because, of course, you can hold both of those beliefs. And
I'm not.
I don't fully agree with her, but those are 2 points that don't prove each other, but they also don't stand against each other.
She also mentioned that in some cases with oppression, violence is necessary. Surely this is one of those instances.
You mean if this was real life,
yes,
it would be justified to use violence? I'd agree.
I mean, look at the state of the universe it's setting. What else are they supposed to do?
I don't know. Some of the people we are supposed to call alt-right, but I'm just gonna call them Nazis, say, oh, if you fight against oppression, you're just as bad as the oppressor. No, fuck that shit. Immortan Joe is someone who needs...
Say to keep people down.
Yeah, because the oath is only said by people who have the power to hold others down.
I mean, come on, violence is the only language Immortan Joe would understand.
Do you have the MLK quote right now?
Which one?
The one from Birmingham jail. I don't want to misquote him, so
I know it, but I don't want to misquote it.
he said, "A riot is the language of the unheard."
Mm-hmm.
And I think in this thing, in this situation, it's really the people who are being oppressed by Immortan Joe and his regime really have nothing to do other than revolt, because their voice can't be heard otherwise.
That's
And
what I'm
then,
saying.
and I know that there are a lot of people even today, 50 years after, or how many years after Martin Luther King said that, who would disagree with that. And that is why we need movies like this to basically say, see, that is what he fucking meant. Because, and this is the other thing why I don't think this is a feminist movie. This movie uses women and poor people, but mostly women.
Mostly women.
Yeah, because the women are actually developed and the poor people are just a mass of people.
They're kind of just extras.
Yeah. Uses these oppressed groups, but you can really say this about anything. This movie is basically showing you why sometimes just disagreeing with what is pushing you down isn't enough. And I know that some people are completely nonviolent and that Sarkeesian thinks that, I'm not sure if I said this correctly, basically that violence is unfemale. But
yes, I wanted to come into this. I don't, at the risk of strawmanning her, which I really don't want to do. She gets enough of that shit as it is, and may not have meant to say this. She didn't directly say this at all, but what she said can be interpreted as there's a certain rhetoric going around by some people who claim to be feminists, or at least claim to support equality. I think this is more common in the second wave, and for some reason now I'd mostly associate with, say, New Age communities and stuff. This idea of, oh, if women quote unquote acting like men is not empowering, and that if women want to be liberated, they should adhere to some form of, I don't believe this term has any meaning, but femininity in the traditional sense. So this idea that in order to truly be liberated, truly be happy, blah blah blah, women should act a certain way, men should act a certain way, and they'll claim that this is feminist, and this certain way typically resembles classical gender roles, typically resembles, say, for women, a domestic role, or being, say, socially and sexually submissive in a sense. And by saying, oh, there's nothing wrong with that, we think it's a good thing, they try to claim that they're somehow progressive, but it just looks to me like patriarchy wrapped up in a pretty ribbon.
is that a quote from somewhere? The last thing, patriarchy wrapped in a pretty ribbon? I've heard something along those lines someplace.
As have I. It might have been from an article or something. I'm not actually sure.
If somebody knows that quote, please link it to us. Please link it to us.
I've heard that rhetoric a lot. I'm not suggesting, by the way, that if women or men, if anyone of any gender has a behavioural preference that coincidentally fits into a social norm, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying enforcing these things and using terms like masculine and feminine is the problem.
Yeah, basically, you and I agree that people should just find out which roles fit them best and...
if any.
Yeah, well, what they want to do with their lives, and don't give a shit if it's traditionally thought to fit into their gender role. Just, if you want to act what would be considered in a feminine way or in a masculine way by old as fuck standards, just do that. No matter if you are a guy or a girl or whatever. Just do what you feel.
But they don't have to refer to it.
Yeah.
as I see a lot of people who do fit into those roles writing articles about how it's the way to be happy and how it's the way to be and all that. Honestly, if I tried to fit into that role, I would be fucking miserable. For those who do, great. For those who like it that way, great. But I kind of just wish people could speak for themselves.
And people who fit the traditional roles and are happy with that just think because they are happy with that, everyone else is.
Yes. So
Even
by
the,
using terms like masculine and feminine and so on and so forth, and sometimes going as far as to try and propagate it as some universal spiritual truth. No, that is what I have a problem with. That is gaslighting. That is brainwashing.
and I personally just feel happy picking from both sides and seeing what fits me and what doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that we have such sides is the issue, as I said. Personally, I don't feel comfortable at all with the role that society would assign to me, but that's just my preference.
Even though you
By the way,
are
I'm not.
happy as a woman, you aren't just happy
I
with.
don't know.
You don't. What?
I don't know. A much deeper question. I'm in no way trying to associate those views with Anita Sarkeesian.
Oh, I
I'm
think we
simply
moved
saying,
on from her already.
yeah. Just in case it sounded that way, I'm not trying to associate those views with her.
But I actually thought about that as well because in preparation for this, I thought about gender roles a lot. And I was thinking, well, what does it actually mean to be a man or a woman or whatever? And I basically tried to figure that out, and I didn't get anywhere with that question.
I mean, neither did I. We have these very polarized concepts. Firstly, where does that leave people who don't identify within a binary?
That is what I thought about as well.
And also, why are masculinity and femininity even concepts? There is no one thing that all men have in common. There's no one thing that all women have in common, or all male and female living organisms, or whatever. I mean, not even biologically. There are trans people who might have different anatomy to cis people,
And also, there are people
and
who aren't XY or XX.
yes, and but may still identify as male or female. There's no one personality trait or role or anything that all people of any gender adhere to. So it's almost like these concepts have just come out of someone's ass.
It is, and they are not even used in all cultures.
They're not, and they vary between cultures as well. If we can neither get a logical foundation or a consensus for a concept, why have it?
I mean, the only answer you're gonna get for that is, well, that it's how it's always been. But that's a fucking stupid answer.
Oh, that's just the way it is. That's called losing an argument.
Do
I mean,
we-
I actually challenged someone on this subject. Someone who was very much into, I wouldn't really label it, but spirituality in a sense, and was always talking about masculine and feminine. And she basically had this idea that all women are somehow submissive in a way, otherwise they're not being true to themselves, or that all men are leaders, or they're not being true to themselves. And when I try to say something about that, she just yells at me, "That's just the way it is." How can we challenge these concepts when people refuse to listen, though?
By art. For example, there is this movie which brings points like this up when you talk about it after seeing it. I don't know, maybe you and the audience have heard of it. It's called Mad Max Fury Road. I think that is basically the only way to go about this. What we are doing right now and what George Miller was doing a few years ago. Make art that inspires conversation and then have that fucking conversation.
Oh, I've tried to make art. I'm a very easily demotivated person.
Just keep at it. You've got the ideas and you've got some skills, and the same goes for me. But also,
And you got a tiny accordion. You were doing it again.
I know.
Maybe someone should just tie your hands behind your back when you speak. And don't call me a perv.
Why would I call you perf now?
I'm not the one who's perving over Tom Hardy.
He is cute though. Also,
True.
what I mostly want to do with him is nothing sexual. I just want to like go through his hair with my hand, and it looks really fun to like go.
Define going. I can't fucking do it.
Like putting your hand on someone's head and just
That
moving
sounded
around
like
in
a
the
fucking
air.
car.
What?
That sounded like a fucking car.
I mean, it fits, doesn't it?
It does.
And I think this is a good part to end the podcast on.
So, I had one more point to make regarding the character and role of Furiosa. So, as you mentioned earlier, she's a female character who has traits which would traditionally be seen as masculine traits.
Mm-hmm.
And often in society, women who have more of this type of aesthetic and this type of personality get a lot of shit from both sides of the argument in terms of accusations of self-hatred and the like, and accusations of looking down on other women. For example, the so-called alt-right will often say that such women are rejecting their so-called femininity. That's a common one, which is also a common thing said by different feminists who I would argue aren't feminists at all, which I brought up earlier. Even on the more liberal side of the argument, these women often get accused of internalized misogyny, and sometimes this is true. Sometimes you'll get people saying, "Oh, I'm not like the other girls," and will accuse women who dress or act a certain way of being fake, of being traditionally minded, and so on and so forth. And yes, that is a problem. There are also those who have these personality traits and these interests and don't look down on other women at all. And I think the movie did a really good job in showing that, in making such a character and having one of the main events of the movie be her helping out and rescuing a group of women that society may view as more traditional in their role, in how they look, in how they think or speak. And she didn't look down on them even once. And I really like the fact that they included this.
You actually made me realize another thing, which I just now started thinking about. So it might be complete bullshit, but the women that are traditional, in a sense, that she and Max are rescuing,
Yeah.
they are the slaves of Immortan Joe, right? And she used to be his right-hand man before she rejected him.
Yeah.
So the woman who used to be one of the bad guys and is now a good guy is gendered as masculine, while the women that used to be the slaves are gendered feminine. I don't know.
Oh, I did notice that. It was almost as though, according to Immortan Joe, there's women and then there's women, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. Do you? I don't have a real world point to make. I didn't even think about the in-universe point you just made. Do you have anything real worldy to follow that up with? Because I don't.
A concrete example?
Maybe a concrete example or what that means in the movie for the real world, like anything that's actually relevant to real people.
Okay, yeah. So, as I was saying, with the point where women who don't fit a traditional role get a lot of shit for that, equally there is the issue with those who do, in some ways, aren't being taken seriously or given respect.
Mm-hmm.
That is a thing. Yeah, that is a thing where women are only getting respect if they adopt behaviors which are socially coded male, whether they want to or not. However, this argument is often twisted by right wingers and by also by a lot of the new age people I was talking about with the difference feminism and all that, trying to say things like, "Oh, it's not right that women have to act like men to get respected." They start saying things like that, start referring to these behaviors as an intrinsic male thing, or saying that those women who fit these traits are somehow not being true to themselves, even when that's not the case. So that's a valid point, but there's also dangers with that point.
Which would be?
As I said, it gets twisted a lot.
Alright. Before we end this podcast, I have one more small point to make about something you said after we recorded the first episode.
Okay.
I described myself as an SJW or social justice warrior and said that I wanted to reclaim that phrase, which is an insult to people like us. And after we recorded, you said you had some problems with that. I have some problems with all other terms, and I think what I am would be best described as social justice warrior. And I think fighting for social justice, actually fighting for it, not just talking about it, actually getting out and getting shit done, is very important. And this movie, as I said before, makes a good point about actually taking up, well, not, it doesn't have to be taking up arms, but taking action for social justice, and not just talking or not just voting. I mean, voting is the least you can do for social.
Get out there and vote.
Yeah, if there's something to vote for, vote, but it...
Unless you hate all the candidates equally, vote.
If you hate all the candidates equally, you haven't read up on the candidates enough. Do some research and fucking vote. Both our countries are voting this year, and if you're listening to this when we actually release this, go. If you're of age and live in one of our countries, go.
I can't remember who the fuck said this. Let me know if you know who said this. But there was one quote, something to the effect of how not voting is not an act of protest, but rather an act of surrender. If you let me know who said this.
I know that.
You know that, right?
I'll find it out and I'll mention it in a later podcast.
It's true though.
It's true, it is, yeah. But what I'm saying is, social justice warrior, if you use that as an insult, you don't understand this world yet. I don't know how that is a negative term. I know it started out as one, but
my take on it is
make it a positive term. And now you, Maddie.
If you take the term as it is.
Yeah? You mean as an insult?
No, I mean...
at face value, yeah.
At face value, without looking at the context it's often used in. Yeah, it's kind of badass if you think about it. And it kind of is a positive term compared to the others. And less loaded with meaning in some ways. But the issue I have with it is not ideological. I would love to reclaim it, but it's purely a matter of personal annoyance. When I see people on, be it YouTube, be it Twitter, be it Reddit, whatever, all these bloody Nazis repeating SJW over and over again, hurling it at anyone who promotes the slightest ideal of progression, like a bunch of fucking clones just repeating the same buzzword over and over. You don't like what you hear? SJW, SJW, go die SJW, get cancer SJW.
And that is why we need to fucking reclaim it.
It's just become so fucking grating. It drives me nuts.
So
you see what I mean?
Yeah. So let's do like Max and Furiosa though, and reclaim what is ours, what we need for in this society. And what we need in this society is a culture of real
social justice
SJWs, real social justice warriors. And we can do what we can, and you can do what you can to make this world a better place, a more just place. I'm gonna
go into politics and make that your speech.
We'll see you guys next week when we will talk about, for the first time, something else than a movie. Next time we will talk about the
Something else. Rewind. Something else than a movie.
something that's not a movie. Next
Something
week,
other than a movie.
not my first language. Next week we will talk about the self-titled or White album by the Beatles. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful week. I've been Ruven.
I've been Maddie.
And witness me!